Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Path to Greatness show. Here this afternoon, we have a very incredible guest, all the way from the United States of America. Her name is Jehan Jones. She is a published author, she's an educator, and also she's a U.S. Foreign Service official, which she has worked in the Dominican Republic, in Germany, in Ghana, in Russia, South Africa, Venezuela, and now she currently resides in France. Welcome to our platform, Mrs. Jones. How are you doing today?
I'm fantastic. Thank you. It's great to be here.
Nice. What time is it there in France now? Are we in the same
Uh,
timeline, same time zone?
we are now. I think at some point of the year, there's an hour difference between France and South Africa. But right now, we're both at the same time, 11, 12.
Oh, that's interesting. Thanks a lot for sharing that information. If you don't mind, you know, just sharing a little bit about yourself as to where you grew up and just try to paint a vivid imagery as to how your childhood was like.
Oh, okay, great. So thank you. Like you said, my name is Jehan Jones. I was born in Central Southern Virginia. So Virginia is a state on the East Coast of the United States. And I grew up in a town called Petersburg. It's a city. And I have two sisters who I grew up with. I'm the middle child. Um, my I thought we were kind of rich, but when I moved to college, I realized that we were like poor middle class. But in where I'm from, we had a house. We visited our grandparents. We pretty much got what we wanted and needed. We had food, we had clothes. We didn't understand that rich people went on vacations, or like there were things you could have. You could go to the store and buy whatever you wanted. So I felt very rich. And where I'm from, I think I was rich. And I was rich in culture and rich in spirit, and my mom introduced me to a lot of things that my community didn't necessarily have, and she would drive hours to take us other places so we would learn things and experience things. And I always had a taste for what else is out there. My name Jehan, it comes from Anwar Sadat. He was the president of Egypt when I was born, and his wife was named Jehan Sadat. And I'm not from Egypt, but my mom followed the Camp David peace accords, which established peace between Israel and Egypt. And she wanted to go to work at the UN, and she wanted to, because our town is pretty small. She wanted to leave where she grew up and travel the world, and she named me after a world leader, with this hope that one day I would do it. So one of the greatest I guess, aspects of life is that I accomplished my mother's dream, and my mother's traveled the
Mm.
world visiting me in the places I've worked. And I think for me, that's pretty amazing. When I've reflected on that recently, like, I was named after someone, my mother wanted to work abroad, and I was able to do it. And so I think that's the American dream, and probably the South African dream, for your children to accomplish what you couldn't, and for the generations after you to have more than you had, and have more freedoms, have more opportunities, and use those for the good of mankind. So I talk in tangents, so I went way off tangent. And you asked me about my childhood. I was curious. I
No,
was a
not at
nerd.
all. Not at all.
Yeah.
I mean, you've shared very valuable insights there. Yes, indeed. I suppose that every parent wants to impart, a certain level of access, to their children so that they can actually accomplish what they couldn't have. And thanks a lot just for sharing about your background there. You said you grew up in Pittsburgh. Do you mind sharing
Petersburg,
it
sorry.
to just the outlook of Pittsburgh for people like us who have no idea as to what kind of um, you know, what kind of a place it is, and also is it a Republican or is it a democratic state?
So I'm from Petersburg, Petersburg. I was also a cheerleader, so Petersburg, and different from Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's a big city. Petersburg is a
Oh,
smaller city in Southern Virginia. When I was a kid, there were still some farms on the outskirts of our community. It was during the heyday, a really big city, a big important part of Virginia. It was important in the Civil War. We had a major battle, the Battle of the Crater, that was fought there. It was important in the American Revolution. And there used to be tobacco companies and different organizations that closed down. and then it hit very hard times. But culturally, it's always been a very important city, and it's really made full circle now. And it's there's lots of investments happening in my hometown. Majority of the kids when I went to school were Black. I lived in a very Black area. We all pretty much were all Black, around the same, a little bit better off or poor. And we had one middle school or college, one high school, one lycée. We had a couple elementary schools, and we all pretty much knew each other. I had a smaller class, and there wasn't a lot to do in our hometown. As a beautiful, amazing place. We had parks, and we have we had two libraries. We had a movie theater, but there wasn't, like I'm in Paris now. We didn't have that. When I was a kid, we couldn't walk out the house and take a train somewhere and experience the different things I can experience here. But we had a lot of love, and a lot of people loved us, and a lot of effort went into our childhood
Sorry for
and things.
interjecting there, Mrs. Jones.
Yeah.
You've mentioned something that you guys at that particular time did not have access to public transportation. Do you think maybe there's a contrast between that and the racial division that we experienced here under the oppressive regime of apartheid? Do you think maybe there's a glaring similarity there?
Okay, so I just thank you for asking that question, because it allows me to correct myself. It's not that we didn't have public transportation. We had city buses. There were buses that could take you places, but because it's a small city, it is not like New York City. It's not like Paris. I was making that comparison. There aren't
Okay.
it's not an underground train system. So no one invested in the underground train system in my hometown, because there would be nowhere to go, in this underground train system. They have that in Washington, D.C. They have it in New York City. We did not have it in my hometown. That is not common. We have city buses that could take people. There are definitely legacies, and there are similarities between legacies of Jim Crow South and legacies of slavery. There's similarities with legacies of apartheid. That definitely, I'm sure there's some really smart people who've written books comparing, America post slavery, America post Jim Crow, during Jim Crow with South Africa and apartheid. I don't feel like I have all the information to answer that question, but I definitely think there's similarities. And in both places, you have people who had and people who did not have. In both places, you had people who were misfairly is not a word, unfairly mistreated, based on racism and unconscious biases, based on, incorrect assumptions about a person's potential. And, in both places, the good overcame the bad, and, people moved forward and learn from mistakes. And obviously there's still legacies of everything, but, in both places, I know we've overcome, a lot of our adversity and problems.
Now, thanks a lot for highlighting that. So do you suppose that your family structure was very influential towards your diplomatic pursuits? Would I be?
Yes, I think so. I think my parents always encouraged us to ask questions, to seek more, to do things. They would take us to different communities. I would have summer programs or enrichment programs outside of my community. I had to interact in spaces where I was the only Black child. And that was not something I had to deal with at school, because I was one of many. But my mom purposely put me in situations where I went to summer camps or places where she had to drive me a couple of hours so that I would experience what it's like to be the only person in the room who looks like me, to learn how to move in spaces, different spaces as a child, so that I could be prepared to work. I mean, it helped me work abroad. Whether she had the master plan written, I don't know, but definitely it helped me learn how to represent the US abroad and be in different spaces, because I grew up. I had the option of staying in my community, but my mom forced me to be outside of my community so I could learn how to live in both areas.
It sounds fascinating. And speaking about that, which was your first country that you set foot in as part of your work, that is?
My first country that I lived in abroad was Spain, but my first country I had foreign diplomatic experience was South Africa. I was an intern, but I worked at the U.S. Embassy in Pretoria. But the first country that I was a diplomat, where I represented the United States as a foreign service officer, was the Dominican Republic in 2004.
Okay, so where did you, I know you studied in the University of Massachusetts, if you don't mind sharing as to how that experience was like, and what kind of, you know, influence, that it had, in contribution to your education and your trajectory, that meaning now your career?
Right. So for undergraduate, I went to George Mason University, which is in Fairfax, Virginia, and it was less than 3 hours of my hometown. So in some ways, it helped me move away from home, but also get home quickly. I ran track for the track team, which being a student athlete is an environment that I wish everyone could experience in college. It keeps you well-rounded, and I think it keeps you focused on studying and on being part of a team. Um, Even if my kids don't make it to the Olympics or something like that, I hope that they all have some type of organization like that. I also became a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated in college, which also created the leader in me and helped craft and shape who I am. And then after George Mason, I went to George Washington University in Washington, D.C., and I got a master's in international affairs. And getting a master's in international affairs and doing all the theoretical, the research and the study on how countries work, on how countries function, on foreign diplomacy was very helpful for my job in the future.
Awesome. Thanks a lot for sharing that. So you then traveled to Spain. Do you mind sharing as to what that first experience was like and what your mandate is, if maybe that information is not classified?
No, I would never say anything classified. And nothing about Spain was classified anyways. I was studying
Okay.
abroad. I was studying Spanish and Spanish culture. And for me, it was my first time leaving the US. This was 1999, I think. And it was before everyone had a cell phone and everyone had a mini computer. I really don't know how I got off the plane to my host family's house without speaking Spanish, without having like Google Maps. But somehow I got in a taxi, I got to their house. It was a really great experience to study abroad, to live with a family. It took me out of a comfort zone. I think the two most important things we can do in our life is read, you're reading or I reading, and travel. And if you cannot travel out of your country, travel out of your city, out of your location. It just
Mm.
changes your environment when you can be somewhere else. And moving to a place where people didn't speak English, this many years ago, it wasn't as common. Now you travel tourism, people speak English everywhere. But mostly I had to learn Spanish quickly to communicate. And you didn't know this, but one of the things that happened to me in Spain put me into the foreign service. So I was walking down the street
Mm.
and I wore a Ralph Lauren shirt. As I mentioned, I was poor-ish growing up and I didn't have any brand name clothes. And so when I got in college and I got a job, I had a job too. I ran track, I had a job, and I was in a sorority. And I had good grades, but I had a job. So one of the things I bought was like this Ralph Lauren shirt that had this big American flag on it. And I remember wearing
Mm.
it, but I didn't wear it because I woke up thinking, I want to show everybody I'm an American. I really was like, this is my best shirt because it's Ralph Lauren and I want to wear this.
Mm.
So I had it on without even thinking what I looked like, what it meant to wear an American flag in public. I didn't even cross my mind that there was anything that could be perceived as negative. So I'm walking down the street and this man's coming towards me. Back then, I thought he looked really old. He was probably only 40, 50, but I remember him being very old. He was on a bike. He got off his
Mm.
bike and I thought he was going to ask me for directions because he was clearly looking at me. He was coming closer to me and I was getting ready to say, bonjour, bonjour, hola, and, me
Yeah.
llamo Jehan. And he spit on me. He spit on me purposely.
What?
He went, he spit on my face, on my arms, and he
What?
started yelling at me about how much he hated America and America. All these things, and he started yelling at me and he was pointing at me. And I was 19 years old and I don't think I started
Wow.
crying. I think I was just shocked. I was confused and I was like, what is happening? So eventually a crowd got around us and they pulled him away. And a nice little old lady pulled me out of the middle of the street and wiped my face with a handkerchief and was telling me, and she was saying in Spanish, everything's gonna be okay, you're gonna be okay. And at some point, someone saw me and said, oh, I go to school with her. And he took my hand and took me back to my host family. And I was still in shock. Like, it's a few times in my life where I felt like I was outside of myself looking at what was happening. And that was like one of the first times. And
I remember the guy said to me, I meant to tell you when you wore that shirt to class the other day, you should stop wearing it because people don't like Americans. And I looked at him and I said, people don't like Americans? And he was like, yeah, you really don't want to broadcast your American abroad because people don't really like us. And I said, who don't like us? And I had never heard that people didn't like Americans. And so this was, many years ago. Hopefully people love Americans more now, but this is many years ago. And I remember learning in that moment that what I thought of as America, what I thought of as our country of greatness and innovation and creativity and good food and music and sports, I thought everybody around the world saw that image. And I started to learn and watching television in that country and watching the news that people had different opinions about the US. And some of it was based on, false reporting. And some of it was based on the worst of our culture that had been magnified in the news. But, and so I made a promise to myself. I didn't know what the job was, but I said I wanted to get a job where my job was to travel around the world and show people what America is like. And that pretty much is what I've been doing for the last 23 years is that, and my job, I use culture and I use education to show the local population to show them America, to get more students to study in the US, to create exchange programs, to bring American artists, American speakers, American writers to that host country, to take people from the host country to the US on exchange programs. And that's been the focus of my life, besides my children and Christianity and everything else that's part of me. But for my job, it's been showing America to others abroad.
Thanks a lot for sharing that. I'm very saddened to hear about the experience that you had encountered because in as much as you are American, it doesn't give anyone the any form of right to actually spit in your face just because you're wearing a Ralph Lauren T-shirt that has an American flag on it. You, that's your culture, that's your narrative, that's your identity, right? You can't now be punished because you are an American, or you're being punished because of other people's, social political beliefs. Yes, I mean, it goes without saying there have been a lot of wars throughout history whereby America has tried to instill their version of diplomacy, which is, in some respects, that diplomacy was not so widely accepted, by those particular natives. So I'm very sorry to hear that you kind of like experienced such a very traumatic experience. But I think the good news is that you actually bounced back. You didn't actually allow that experience to determine your outcome, to determine your future, to determine your identity. Instead, it just seems to have seemed it seems to have served as a vehicle of inspiration, if I can put it like that, for you to say, look, I'm going to actually continue on to try to instill this educational influence both at home and also abroad, also as well. So I think that's what I found very encouraging about the work that you have done and also the work that you're currently doing right now. So tell us a bit about Germany and Ghana. What were your experiences there?
My best friend's family is from Ghana, so I grew up knowing that Ghana was a country. We have a historically Black college and a university in my hometown, and several of the professors that came to this college were from the African continent. And so she went to school with me and we grew up together. So I knew Ghana existed and I knew she would go there in the summer. And I was like, take me one day. And I knew it was this magical place I wanted to go. So when you're joining the Foreign Service or State Department, in the first two assignments, you are directed to those assignments. And later you interview for your assignments and you get picked based on your work experience and what you said in the interview. So the first two, before you're tenured, they give you a list of places and you rank order them. And Ghana was my first choice that second session, and I got it. And so I thought I knew, but I didn't know. It was great being in West Africa, I had been in South Africa already at that point in my life, but I'd never been in West Africa. And I think one of the things I took away from living in Ghana was people first and stuff second. People would show up at my house without calling me and say, hey, what do you want to do today? And I'm like, in America, you have to call somebody first and text it, and you have to set up an appointment. And people would be late to a meeting because they spent people first. They saw somebody they knew, they had a conversation with them, they spent time with them.
I picked up some of that in my personality, where I focus on people and not the situation and the circumstance. I cultivate relationships before I start in a business or asking questions. And I really do want to know about someone. I really do sit down and drink tea and have food. And then maybe later we'll talk about. I think I was very American, a very like, let's get stuff done in the beginning. But now that experience helped me understand that the relationship is more important than what I think is important, because the relationship will help me get things I don't even know I'm looking for.
And what
So in
differences did you perceive from there? Your experience in Ghana and Germany, and also in Spain. How different was South Africa for you?
So also the different stages of your life are important when you live somewhere. So when I lived in the Dominican Republic, when I was in Spain, and when I was in Ghana, I was single and I had no children. This last time that I lived in South Africa for 3 years in Cape Town, I had 3 kids with me. So it was a different situation, a different environment, and I'm interacting with the schools more, and I'm interacting with different people. So it's really hard to compare countries. I think every country I've lived in has had an amazing culture, has had food that I loved, has had people I love being around. It's always bittersweet moving to a new place. Every country I've lived in, I've had a culture that, like, I've had a church that I belong to, and I've had like some kind of physical activity. In Cape Town, I did a lot of hiking, and I had a dance group of moms that I was part of, and we practiced together and we performed, which was a lot of fun. I didn't have that in the other places I lived. And in Ghana, I took dance classes with a drummer, and it was African dance class, as a traditional like West African themes in the dance class. In Spain, I lived with a family and I was young. So like it's a totally different situation. No other country did I live with somebody. Everywhere else I lived by myself or with my family. Excuse me.
Great. That's very
Yeah. I lived in
fascinating.
Russia.
So
Russia was very different
within
from everywhere else. There's just, yeah.
it seems like we're mapping out, the whole foundation of geopolitics right now. When you getting back at the international policy right now, what is the fundamental thing that encouraged you to say, I want to incept myself within the framework of international policy? And then lastly, what would you say to people that actually want to venture in their own personal capacity towards their own towards their while walking towards their own path to individual greatness? If you could summarize that in 3 minutes, I believe that we are left with 4 minutes right now.
Well, I wanted to, like I said, I wanted to work in a job where I showed America abroad. And we have so many diplomats from different walks of life. And I wanted to be one of those people who interacted with people in the world to show them what America is. We're not a perfect country, but we are a country of immigrants, of people of culture, of people who are innovative and creative. We have the way our country is set up, it fosters innovation and creativity, entrepreneurship in ways that other countries don't. And so I think that's great. So we can work together as partners with other countries to come up with solutions to our world problems. I just think you should try to find the things you love. People are focused on, we need to make money and take care of our family, but also figure out what you really love. And hopefully that thing is something you can prosper at and make money and take care of your family. But find those things, find the thing that you can pair up together, that something you love, something you could do good and leave a mark on the world, and also something that you can take care of your family and the generations after you. So you can find that trifecta. You're very, very lucky, and keep working in all the different areas until you find a place where they come together.
That's great. So fascinating. Such a very inspirational message. And I trust that our viewers, our audience will really be captivated by your story, and it's where you have actually emanated from to becoming the woman that you are today. So with that said, I just want to give, sincere gratitude to you and your team just for accepting our invitation to become a part of this program. And we trust that we'll continue to interact with you more. This is certainly not going to be the last time that we're going to be hearing from you.
Thank you. Hope you have a great day.
Awesome. Well, that's all that we have, folks, for today. And with that said, I just want to leave you with this. Continue dreaming, continue pursuing your goals. There will be difficult times. Sometimes you will feel discouraged. Sometimes you feel like you don't have the adequate resources. to accomplish what you want to accomplish, but use what you have. Use whatever is on the palm of your hands to actually get from planet A to B, from rags to riches. So with that said, stay vigilant. Thanks a lot, Mrs. Jones. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.